The silence was the first thing that hit me, a physical weight in the air, pressing in from all sides. I stood on the edge of the property, my boots sinking slightly into the damp, moss-covered earth. Around me, the towering redwoods of the Pacific Northwest clawed at a perpetually overcast sky, their ancient branches dripping with the late autumn mist. This valley, tucked away a day's drive from the nearest town, felt like a forgotten corner of the world, swallowed whole by the encroaching forest. I'd come here, to this century-old homestead, seeking the quiet, a break from the relentless hum of the city, the incessant chatter, the endless cacophony that had started to feel less like life and more like a slow suffocation. I fancied myself an urban explorer, a documentarian of decay, but this was something different. This was silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence of its own, thick and heavy. The homestead itself was a testament to time standing still. A two-story farmhouse, weathered gray siding, a porch swing creaking almost imperceptibly in the damp air. Outbuildings, hunched and moss-covered, dotted the perimeter. A barn, a woodshed, what looked like a chicken coop. But it wasn't the age that unsettled me, it was the preservation. There was no dust, none. Not a single mote danced in the slivers of weak light that pierced the mist. The windows, though grimy, were intact. The front door, unlatched, swung inward with a faint groan that sounded impossibly loud in the pervasive quiet. I stepped inside, my breath catching in my throat. The air was cool, but not stale. It smelled faintly of old wood, and something else, something I couldn't quite place, like stagnant air given a phantom scent of life. The living room was as though the inhabitants had simply stepped out for a moment. A half-knitted scarf, needles still embedded, lay draped over a rocking chair. A child's wooden train sat on the hearth, its small painted wheels facing outward as if mid-journey. A book, open face down, rested on a small table beside an armchair. No dust, no decay, no spiderwebs. It was perfect, preserved, and utterly wrong. I walked through the house, each creak of the floorboards a jarring intrusion. The kitchen had dishes stacked in a drying rack, a half-eaten loaf of what looked like petrified bread on the counter. Upstairs, the beds were made, the sheets smoothed. In one room, a doll sat propped against a pillow, its porcelain eyes staring blankly at the door. I ran a hand over a dresser, expecting to find the gritty film of decades of neglect, but my fingers came away clean. It was as if a powerful, unseen hand had simply wiped away time's passage. The lack of natural sounds was the most unnerving aspect. I'd expected the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the sigh of the wind through the massive redwoods, but there was nothing. The mist itself seemed to absorb all vibrations, leaving the world muted, muffled, and dead. It was a silence that felt less like peace and more like an absence, a gaping void where life should have been. I spent the first day methodically documenting, taking photos, making notes. My detached observer persona, usually a comfort, felt flimsy here. A quiet foreboding began to gnaw at me, a persistent little worm of unease in my gut. By late afternoon, the light faded completely, swallowed by the mist. I set up my tent in the living room, feeling an irrational need for the solid walls of the house around me, rather than the vast, oppressive silence outside. That night, the silence intensified. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to nothing. Not even the hum of my own blood in my ears. It was an unnatural quiet, like the world had simply stopped breathing. Then, through the grimy window, I saw it. An indistinct shape in the mist, just beyond the property's edge. It was large, vaguely humanoid, but blurred, shifting, like something seen through warped glass. It didn't move. It simply was, a darker patch against the already dim gray, seemingly watching, waiting. I told myself it was the mist playing tricks, a trick of the light, a gnarled tree stump. But the shape remained, still and patient. I watched it for what felt like hours, my heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I drifted into a restless sleep, the shape lingering in my mind's eye. The next morning, the mist was thicker, a swirling, soupy white. The shape was gone. I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, born of solitude and an overactive imagination, but the unease persisted, a cold knot in my stomach. I continued my exploration, venturing into the outbuildings. The barn was immaculate, tools hanging neatly on pegboards, a faint smell of hay that belied its age. The woodshed was stocked with perfectly split logs, as if waiting for a winter that never came. In the chicken coop, the nests were empty but clean, as if the birds had simply flown away an hour ago, not decades. Everything was in a state of suspended animation, preserved not by careful upkeep, but by some profound, inexplicable stasis. I found a child's worn leather ball in the long grass beside the house, perfectly round, not a stitch frayed. I squeezed it, and it felt pliable, like it had just been inflated. No decomposition, no rot. It was like the very fabric of time had been stretched thin, frozen over this patch of land. As the second day bled into twilight, the mist intensified once more. I cooked a meager dinner on my portable stove, the small hiss of the flame seeming to echo in the vast stillness of the house. I kept glancing at the windows, a prickle of dread on my neck. Then I heard it, a faint tap. So soft, so subtle, I almost dismissed it as my imagination. But then it came again. Tap, tap. It was coming from upstairs. My blood ran cold. I was alone in this house. I grabbed my headlamp, its beam cutting a stark path through the gloom, and slowly ascended the creaking stairs. Each step was an effort, my muscles tense, my breath held tight. The sound led me to the child's bedroom, the one with the doll. The doll. It was no longer propped against the pillow. It was sitting on the edge of the bed, facing the door. Its porcelain eyes seemed to follow me as I entered, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt to its head. And then I saw it. On the wooden floor, directly in front of the doll, were 3 small, dark drops. Not blood, not mud. They were too viscous, too perfectly round. My heart hammered. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that those drops hadn't been there before, and the doll hadn't moved itself. I felt the skin on my scalp crawl. I backed out of the room slowly, my headlamp beam shaking. Downstairs, I stumbled, nearly tripping over my own feet. The silence of the house, which had been unnerving, now felt malicious, predatory. It wasn't an absence of sound. It was an active absorption, a suffocating blanket that swallowed every potential noise, every whisper of life. I spent the second night huddled in my sleeping bag, eyes wide open, staring at the window. The shape was there again, a little closer this time, a deeper shadow in the swirling gray. It wasn't moving, but I could feel its presence, a profound and ancient watchfulness. It felt like something had been waiting for a very, very long time. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Gas leaks, hallucinations? But the doll, the drops, the unnerving preservation of everything, this wasn't natural. The abandoned state of the homestead wasn't a result of time and decay. It was a consequence of something else, something that had caused the inhabitants to vanish mid-sentence, leaving everything exactly as it was. And whatever it was still here. The next morning, the mist was so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I needed to leave. The desire for quiet had become a desperate need for noise, for life, for anything that wasn't this oppressive, stagnant stillness. I packed my gear with fumbling fingers, the dread a cold, heavy stone in my gut. As I made my way to the front door, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. In the living room, near the rocking chair with the half-knitted scarf, a faint shimmering in the air, like heat haze, but the air was cold. It pulsed subtly, and then it solidified, just for a fraction of a second, into a shape. A human form, indistinct, like the one outside, but closer, clearer. It was turning, slowly, towards me. I didn't wait. I bolted out the front door, down the porch steps, and onto the overgrown path. I didn't look back. The silence outside was just as suffocating, but now it felt like a pursuit. I could feel eyes on me, countless eyes, from the depths of the mist. I reached my truck, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key into the ignition. The engine coughed to life, a roaring, beautiful sound that momentarily broke through the silence. I slammed the truck into reverse, tires spinning on the damp earth. As I drove away, the mist clinging to the windshield, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the swirling gray, I saw them. Not one shape, but many, indistinct forms standing at the edge of the property, barely visible, but undeniably there, watching, patiently watching. I never looked back again. The quiet, once a refuge, had become a prison, and the homestead, perfectly preserved in its unnatural stillness, was not abandoned. It was simply waiting for the next person to step into its profound, unsettling silence. And I often wonder, in the dead of night, if those shapes in the mist ever stopped watching.